So the goal of today's session is to sort of understand how to approach outbound today. So most teams, if you're running outbound, you're likely run into the same problem. Either the problem is with fit, your ICP, good ICP accounts, they're not replying, or the problem is with volume. No matter how many emails you send or the calls you make, you're just not getting the desired results. So the problem that we are seeing is that the traditional volume heavy way of doing outbound is just not working. And what is in fact working is something that's opposite to this. And that is what we'll be unpacking with Harinie today. So good to have you with me today, Harinie.
Same here.
Yes. Okay.
Great to be here.
Yeah. We'll start with the fundamental question, Harni. So people are giving up on outbound. They are losing faith in outbound. So, in 10 years of running Leadle, setting up outbound for clients, why do you think that has happened? How has this evolved into this situation?
Well, I won't say that the loss of faith in outbound is entirely unjustified, right? Because even 5 years ago, the situation was that you could sort of identify your ICP, pick a list, understand what message is working for them, send it out, and you would actually be able to book meetings. It was truly as simple as that. Difficulties lay more with like actually finding data, like qualified data, numbers to call, managing the costs of running like things like calling campaigns, etc. Right? And having people who are skilled enough to write the right messages and so on. But these were easier problems to solve, and you would still be able to turn on an engine and actually get outcomes, right? That's kind of what you expect out of any channel. But today, unfortunately, because of the fact that, like, look, data is available and it's available at reasonable cost, so most people are buying data. And then you also have the fact that messaging is far too easy to write with AI today. So you don't really need qualified people. You just need people who know how to use tools to write messages. So what this has done is that like every single person, every single company, and think about this as not just the registered companies, or there are individuals who are consultants who profess to offer the exact same things that larger companies are offering. So it's like hundreds and thousands of people sending messages to the same audience out there. So they just basically become desensitized. They don't want to see this anymore, right? They don't want to see those messages anymore, which is why your conventional way of outbound is not working. But the thing is, the interesting thing is, it is not just outbound as a channel, it is actually inbound as well. Like earlier, think about the days when 5-10 years ago, you could go on Instagram, post regularly, and if you had that consistency and you had a proper niche, which is very similar to what we do with outbound, you would actually be able to become an influencer. Fast forward to today, we all know how difficult it is to actually become an influencer on Instagram, right? The algorithm keeps changing. You don't want to see your messages. Even if you have like a proper niche, you're still not able to do that. So the problem is not just with outbound as a channel, it is with every single channel. The desensitization is so high that none of these channels is actually working in the way that they used to work.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of why there's a loss of faith. I think that, however, outbound is being unnecessarily penalized separately, because I think that the problem exists with all channels. Like if you're doing marketing, you're doing content, you're doing ads, everywhere you have that same problem. It's just that always outbound was seen as this sort of quick fix, right? You go, you switch it on, and low investment. It was always this low investment, high return on investment channel. It is really no longer like that. That is something that we have to clarify. It is still probably one of the least expensive channels relative to the other ones, but it is not as inexpensive as it used to be. So I'd say some of that is justified. The other part is, of course, just the fact that you need to adapt and use that channel in a way that makes sense for today. And a lot of people are not really doing that, right? They're still doing the conventional way of running outbound and expecting it to work, and it is not working. It will simply not work. Those days are over.
Right. So you're saying the problem with outbound today is that it still sticks to the same templated, high volume, post personalization with no relevance kind of stuff, which is just not making sense for today's buyers.
Correct. Even personalization, I see personalization is an interesting word, right? Because for me, it's my pet peeve. People do personalization in the most unpersonalized manner. Like I went to the same university as you. Hey, here's my pitch. Slap that on, like one commonality, and then you slap it on. It does not work like that. That is not personalization. Personalization, in my opinion, when you're sending messages out, has to truly be on a factor of what is relevant for them today, right? From your solution or your product perspective.
Yeah.
Now, that is the right kind of personalization. There's another thing you could also potentially do, which is essentially you use this kind of personal connection to build a relationship. It's a longer process, right? It's a relationship
Correct. Yeah.
based, and then you monitor whether they sort of do something or say something that is relevant to what you're offering. And then in the longer term, you pitch to them. But how many people really have the patience for that? So then
Yeah.
if you're going to do outbound and you want to send those messages, the only right way to do it is to understand what is the right message for that customer today and then send that message out. Sometimes it's not a sales message. Sometimes it is a highly personalized sales message. And you've got to figure that piece out.
Yeah. So how to leverage the channel matters more than the channel itself.
Yes, absolutely. And this is true for every channel, like I said.
Yeah, absolutely. Got it. So by definition, Hari, when we are, defining our ICP, so we already defined the industry, the company size, the revenue, geography, persona, and everything. That's basically whatever we need to know about the market that we are targeting. We already have that information. So isn't that good enough as a starting point to run outbound? Run decent outbound, get decent results.
I'll throw a question back at you. Okay.
Okay.
Let's say you're a TV manufacturer and you've basically manufactured this TV at a certain price. Let's say it's like 1.2 lakhs, that is the cost of your TV.
Okay.
Now you are defining that somebody who, what is the demographic you define? You say anybody with a household income of 20 lakhs plus in the major metro cities, but also in the tier 2 cities is a good customer for me. Okay. Assume that you could figure out who these people are and get their data. Okay. And if you write to all of these people, do you actually think they're going to buy your TV?
Can you put it like that? No.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. You're saying that, I will make a TV. I will just send the information about the TV. And this is typically like, this is the TV, this is the resolution, this is the cost, all of the information, right? And then you say, hey, I see that your household income is over 20 lakhs. And, I think you're a great candidate to buy this TV. And why would anybody buy that TV? They won't. But this is precisely what you think should be working in outbound, right? With your B2B product. Why would it work? Of course, it's not going to work. Now, the interesting thing is, this is exactly how people sold TVs in the past. This is exactly how people sold vacuum cleaners in the past. Like literally go door to door knock, demonstrate your vacuum cleaner. And, so many companies made a ton of money doing this. That's phased out, right?
Yes.
No longer happening. Nobody is doing that kind of thing. Exactly, right? So this is what you have to change about your outbound as well. It is not enough to go door to door, knock on these people's doors and then say that, hey, you know what? Here is a vacuum cleaner. This is how it cleans. Buy it, right? And people would buy it. Today, that is not going to work. Nobody's doing that anymore. Why do you want to do that same outdated thing with your outbound?
Right. Got it. Okay. So I'll say that ICP shows you the market.
Correct. Yes. Answering your question, that is not enough. It is a starting point, but it's not good enough to be able to sell, your product. It is not a good enough amount of information to sell your TV, so to speak. Now, so therefore, this is why it becomes really important to understand who's in the market to buy TVs right now. Similarly, who's in the market to buy your product or your service or your solution right now? You write to them, you're obviously maximizing your chances, not necessarily of a sale, but of even getting a response from them, right?
Yeah. So the easier or the more rational ways to prioritize within the market, so to say.
Today, yes, it is. See, it's all about ROI, right? How much time and money you're spending on a particular activity or channel, and what is the return it is able to give you, right? And for me, the answer is that today you have to spend this extra time on outbound in order to be able to get a response and to be able to get good return on your investment. The sad thing is that the investment into every single channel has significantly increased. Outbound is no longer
that is true.
This, I will just go buy list, send messages. It's no longer like that. You have to spend more money on outbound today than you ever did. But that said, even then it is one of the least expensive channels for generating new pipeline today.
Got it. So in your words, Harinie, how would you put it plainly? How do you put signal-led outbound in plain words?
We said, okay, you said signal-led outbound. I would say that I'm not going to call it signal-led outbound, right? Because that's jargon. What I'm going to say is you need to find people who are in the market for your product or your service. And to me, I find people who are in the market for my product or my service, but trying to understand, like, let me go back to that whole TV analogy because it's really easy to understand. Okay. What's a great signal that some of these people might be in the market for a TV? I would say, let's say they're going into a chroma and they're checking out TVs. It's a great signal that they're probably in the market for a TV, right? Now, all the people going into chroma is still a better set of people to target than random people as we defined earlier. Now, the people going into chroma, plus they have specifically been checking out TVs is a much more sharp list for you to target, right? And now these people are in the market for a TV. The previous set of people who just go into chroma are in the market for some sort of electronic appliance. But the people who are checking out the TVs is specifically in the market for your product, right? So then what happens is if you, let's say, round up all the people who went to all the chromas, that's one set of people. You know that they're checking out some electronics. You will send one type of messages to them. The people checking out the TVs, that becomes super specific. You're going to say, I noticed that you were checking out these TVs and here's what I have to offer, probably really fits, right? So that's the way I would answer your question. This is what signal-led outbound is. Understand that going into a shop is one signal, but going into a shop and checking out a comparable product is the sharpest signal that is available. And if you're able to find this information, then those are your people who fit your buying window, meaning right now they're in the market for what you're selling.
Got it. So I have a question, few questions here. So there's a, how can you, so people are essentially asking, how do we find these specific people? What do you do to find these specific people?
Okay. So I think that's the part where you're able to find the signals that work for you, right? And this is where you need to do some thinking. Like this is where the human intelligence part comes in. As I told you, if you're buying a TV, like one signal to look for is who are all the people who are going and checking out TVs on Chroma, in Chroma, right? Another thing is to look at if you're able to get this data on online ordering sites, who's basically going and shopping, because that's where we do a lot of our, whatever. There are actually these review platforms where you get information about what electronics, how do they compare with each other and things like that. It's another way. Now, let's apply that to our B2B, audience. You have tools, several exist. I think Clay is one of the one that we are using, but there are others. There is BitScale, there's Flocker. There are several tools that actually give you these signals. Now, in the B2B segment, signals will be varied, right? I'm going to let you talk about all the various types of signals, but I'm going to name a few. So funding is one signal, like some company recently got funded, that's one signal. Revenue is another signal. Hiring large numbers of people in a certain department is one signal. Hiring for senior level roles like a head of IT, head of CRO or head of sales, these are again other signals. Now, all of these signals are available on platforms like Clay. Now, where we apply our intelligence is to understand what set of signals is going to track into a meaningful buying window for my product or my solution, right? I gave you the TV example because it's really easy to understand. But in the B2B world, if you name a product, I'll be able to give you like a better sense of this because we do this for our customers. But for now, let me talk about Leadle, right? We offer, two things. We offer lead generation as a service. We offer revenue operations as a service, right? I'm going to keep it simple. Let's take the lead gen piece because everybody understands this. Who would want like lead generation? Everybody in theory, everybody wants lead generation. But that's not my point. How many people are willing to pay for lead generation, right? How do I understand that? To me, the signals that really track are, I would look at funding, recent funding. Definitely, that's a baseline filter. I would look at whether a recent hire has happened at a senior level, like a new head of marketing, a new head of sales, new head of revenue operations. I would look for that. If a company is hiring a large number of SDRs or BDMs, it's another signal we would typically look for. Because all of these things mean that they want to generate pipeline and they're also willing to spend money for it. Okay. Another interesting signal, of course, is people who have worked with other agencies, because for me, that means that they're sold on the idea of working with an agency. How do I get all of these signals? I'm sorry, I got distracted by the question. So to me,
Yeah.
the signals on clay that you get are one layer. Okay. The second layer, of course, is if you're able to go to third-party review sites and for Leadle, pick up people who work with other companies and maybe left an average review or a poor review, I would reach out to those people. The sharpest signal, of course, is I'm doing a lot of marketing content. We do, webinars. I post content regularly on LinkedIn. People, if they match multiple criteria where they have been coming and downloading our content, they've been following me, they're commenting, and they're pretty active. There are also people who are doing any of these activities, right? They've hired a CSO or a bunch of PDMs. Becomes a hyper-focused account for me. It becomes very, very important to reach out to that particular account. So this is how you find the right people to target. Meaning, you look for the signals on clay. There are several. Bhuvaneshwari can outline the number of various signals that are available. Once you do that, you layer that on top of behavior signals where they have visited your website, downloaded your content or whatever it is. And then you map it and track it together and decide how to do that outreach to them. So this is how you find the people in the right buying window.
Yeah. So there is another question, Harinie. I think this is a good one. So when you interact with so many, when you send outreach to so many people, you generally get a negative response. So what do you suggest will convert the negative response to a favorable response? Or
it depends on what the negative response is, right? So if you basically do what we are saying, most often what will happen is, to me, a negative response where somebody says, I'm not really interested, is data, right? Because if I'm doing my outreach in this manner where I'm really picking all of these signals and I am writing to them and they come back and say, I don't really need this, then I have to rethink my signals itself, right? I have to go back and use that data. If 10 people tell me the same thing, then I know that I'm going wrong with the signals that I am using. Maybe somebody who recently hired a head of sales is not the best fit for me, and I might have to look at doing something else. But if the negative response is really, like, to me, this is the worst, right? When there is no response at all. When there is no response at all, that becomes incredibly hard because, like, whatever you're doing, it's not working. But you don't know whether it's not working because you're targeting the wrong people or because you're saying the wrong thing, right? So that's why we generally prefer writing exploratory messages where we position it and not as a sales pitch, but more as a, hey, I noticed that you're doing this. Typically, this means you have this particular problem or you're trying to solve for this particular aspect. And I have something that I've built specifically for this, and I would love your feedback. People like to give feedback. People like to pitch in and give their opinion on things, right? So that's kind of what, in my opinion, you should be doing. Negative responses cannot be converted to positive responses if they are specifically saying, I don't want this or I don't want this right now. Because I don't want this means they're not interested. You let them go. I don't want this right now is a more specific negative response where you can go back and ask them, is this a timing problem? Would you say that I write to you a month later and that might be a better time? So it also depends on the negative response. Every negative response cannot be turned into a positive response. But if there is a qualification in the negative response, which indicates a timing problem, or sometimes they say, hey, you're right, I'm not even the right person for you to be talking about this. Then you have to evaluate if your role definition is correct. Ask them, it would really help to understand who's like the right person to target in your organization. Because my data says like this person, because this is your KRA. You have to be specific. You just can't go back and say, who should I target? They're not going to reply. Instead, you should say, I specifically reached out to you because you list this is one of your KPIs. And that's exactly what I solved for. I apologize if I was wrong, but could you point me in the direction of the right person within this company? Then that gets really specific and you're going to get some response from them.
Yeah. Right. Got it. I hope that answers. So to explain the signal part better, Harinie, I'll just go over the 4 main areas where we track signals. So they get better clarity. So one is the fit signal. Fit signal is basically tracking signals that show does this company belong in our market. So basically what we'll be tracking is industry size, geography, revenue, what stage they are in, what is their business model. All of it will tell us if this is the right fit for us. For example, for Leadle, it's B2B, the geography that we want to target, the industry size, revenue stage, etc. The second is the problem signal, which will basically tell us that if there is any evidence that there is a problem that is active for them and that it exists and it's active for us right now. How will we know that? Through, if they're hiring for a specific role, or they are growing a department, or they are using a tool that is just not helping them to scale, or still doing things manually, things like that, which will show us that there is a specific need and we can sell to that segment. Next is the timing signal, obviously, which will show us why this might matter right now. Which is, basically there is a restructuring that's happening within the company, or there is a hiring spike, or there's a new funding, or there's a new, market that's opened up, or they're expanding into a new segment. All of which will basically tell us that there is a strong need for any product or service right now. Finally, the engagement signal, which is what we call it at Leadle as intent signals, whereby we check for, if they have downloaded any report or a case study, or if they have visited our website, or checked our case studies or pricing pages, or there is a strong link in engagement, or they've reached out to Harinie or Suraj or any of our team. So all of this will show us, all of this we measure them as engagement signals, and for all of these signals we have specific scoring, and basis which we decide this account needs what kind of an outreach this particular account needs. Yeah. So as a follow-up, Harinie, I think this piece will be better if you answer. Like, should every signal, trigger a sales outreach?
Definitely not, right? This is the whole point of signal-led outreach. What you do is this. We talked about the different layers of signals, right? There's the signals that you get on play, whatever you outlined. But there's also the behavioral signals that we have. What I would say is typically you have to do some sort of a scoring framework where you say, let's talk about this, right? Let's say it's funding. Somebody just got funded. They're a series, let's say a company, and they recently raised a large round. That becomes a baseline signal. Everybody who's getting funding is not necessarily going to invest in exactly what you are offering. But do they have the money? Yes, they have the money, right? So that becomes like a baseline signal. Now, on top of that, if you are going to add, one other layer, which is some sort of hiring or firing that is going on, then in my opinion, that becomes something that triggers something a little bit more specific. So let's say the funding layer and then like a hiring has happened. That would trigger a marketing outreach. When I say marketing, I mean you're not pitching anything. You're actually just sharing content with them. You're sharing value without asking for anything in return. That's kind of what you have to do at that stage. Then let's layer a few more signals. Let's say that they're hiring, and that head role is also hiring for a bunch of people within their department. Okay.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you are able to identify that they came and visited your website and they've looked at some solution that you offer. Now, this becomes a lot more specific. You can trigger sales outreach at this point. Okay. Then, and this sales outreach will end up being pretty specific, right? Because they have multiple signals layered. They've also displayed behavioral pattern, which means they may be looking for something right now, which is similar to what you offer. So that should trigger an ABM approach, where one-on-one you sort of say, you list whatever you've observed, their activity as well, and say, this is why I think this is a relevant thing for you. Let's get on a call. So that is ABM. There is one layer which is in between the two, which is a regular sales outreach, which means the people who fit your ICP, some signals are there, right? Maybe 2 or 3 signals are layered, but it is not got any other behavioral or timing related elements. So for these people, you can still do sales outreach, but don't be overly salesy there, right? If you're sending out like 4 or 5 messages, maybe 2 or 3 of them can sort of be more probing messages. 1 or 2 can actually be sales messages. You can also liberally throw in some marketing content which adds value for them. So that's the in-between segment where you do normal outreach for a larger subset of people, which is not ABM, but it's also not marketing. So there's a marketing or nurture layer. Then there is the outbound layer. And then there is that's also bucketed, right? It's for a set of audience. Finally, there is the ABM one-on-one layer that you have.
Got it. All right. So actually, this is one thing based on our client conversations. One thing that makes teams slightly uncomfortable with the signal-led approach is that the list becomes smaller. Like, you basically shrink the reachable market. So what's your angle on that?
Of course, you're going to shrink the reachable market, right? Because I'll go back to the whole, TV and chroma example. The whole set of people that can potentially buy TVs, probably millions of people on the basis of just the demographic that you defined. But when you go and take the list or the roundup of the people who went to chroma, and then also checked out a TV, in a week, you'll probably get what, 200 people at the most? Where are the millions and where is 200? But would you rather write to the millions or would you write to the 200? Right? That's the question that you have to answer, because you can write to the millions of people and feel very good that you did something major, but it's not going to move any needles for you. This is where I'm saying it's better to sort of write, like, do your outreach to the entire set of people who went to Chroma. And then to the people who, specifically were checking out a TV, you do your ABM approach, right? One-on-one outreach to them. Yes, it makes you uncomfortable because it goes against everything that you've done so far with respect to outbound, right? We've always believed that outbound means you will do volume. It's a number game. And at like 10 years ago, it was very true. Just pick up the phone and dial, keep dialing, you'll get the meetings, even if you're like a very mediocre cold calling person, right? That's no longer true. So we have to move past what is making us uncomfortable, and do that exact thing which you feel will not work to see whether it is making a difference for you. Most often it will.
Got it. So, Harinie, we do a lot of multi-channel campaigns, right? We do cold calling, we do LinkedIn, and we do emails. So, how does that change with this signal read approach?
It gels quite well, right? See, we've always used these channels very differently at Leadle. We don't just send out sales messages on every single channel. We've always looked at LinkedIn as a more high-level, one-on-one decision maker connection piece, right? So we do not do a lot of, hey, this is my product, this is how I've added value, this is the amount of money you'll say. These messages never go out on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, you're going to look at like more the problem layer and the KRA layer, right? Because that's where you are directly talking to the decision maker to get them to feel seen is the whole goal. So there you want to talk about, I've been talking to a lot of decision makers like you, and this is the kind of problem they typically have. Notice this is one of your KRAs. Are you working on this? Have you allotted budget to this year? Is this a problem you're looking to solve this year? These are the kind of messages that typically go out on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Email is the piece where you would normally pitch. You will be able to put in your numbers, your metrics, throw your weight around, talk about your pedigree and all of that. Whatever I'm saying is what we did in the past. Okay.
Yeah.
Cold calling is the piece that we treated as a more experimental channel. I know that everybody looks at calling as a let's just get the meetings booked channel.
Good shot, yeah.
Right. But in reality, cold calling is a very, very good experimental piece, right? So if you devise your script correctly, you can use your first 20 to 30 seconds. You may have 3 different problem statements. Try it out, 10 people who pick up the phone, try out one problem statement. Look at the response. If it works, continue. Doesn't work, try out a second problem statement, right? And then move on to the third one. Now, whatever works, if you're able to get past the first 20 to 30 seconds, then you move into the value proposition piece. What value do you propose that is really resonating with that particular audience, right? Again, go through the 2 or 3 different value propositions you've defined, and you can find out which one is really working. And then when you move past the 1 minute of the call into the next piece where you're trying to book the meeting, you can see whether follow through is happening. Anything can excite you for a minute, but are you able to commit to a time on the basis of that? Now, with this information, actually, you can use it to inform what you write to your customers in your LinkedIn and email messages. The right problem statement can go into your LinkedIn message, the right value propositions and, numbers, whatever is exciting your customer can go into your email messages. Now, this is what we did in the past. Today, the difference is that most people don't pick up the phone, right? Because you have active filters. Most people don't respond to email also, no matter how amazing your messages, you can do all the acrobatics you want, they're getting 1,000 emails like that. So the way the overall structure stays the same. The difference is that instead of cold calling, we do warm calling. Now, what I mean by warm calling is signals getting layered, behavior signals happening, then I would do warm calling. Okay, so somebody who if somebody's been constantly engaging with my content, they will say, I see that you constantly engage with Harinie's content. Also that you recently got funded. So I'm wondering if, there's some sort of revenue operations piece here. It's much better than calling and saying, hey, this is what I offer, right? So that's where we kind of use signals to do warm calling. Means if there is just signals that you've picked up from Clay, there's one type of warm call that happens. If there is also behavioral stuff that's going on, there is another type of warm call that happens, but both warm calls are going to give me better responses than a cold call. So that's what we are focusing on right now. From an email perspective, again, same thing applies. Find commonality, find relevant buying window, and then specifically address that in that message, right? And put it in the subject line also. So that's kind of how we are using the different channels.
Okay, so there's another question. How do we balance precision and volume at scale?
Is that your question or did somebody ask the question?
Somebody has asked the question.
I think we answered that with talking about the 3 different layers of campaigns that we're going to run, right? For the larger audience, which is your ICP, you will run marketing. You post content on LinkedIn, engage with their content, share weekly email digests, monthly newsletters, create a larger list, and keep tracking that list for signals that will move them from cold to warm, right? So that means, let's say they got funded, they're hiring like some sort of CX level person, some department is getting a lot of attention, either in a positive or in a negative way. These signals should ideally move that particular prospect from your marketing list to your sales list. So you will run outreach for them. Now that gets layered with behavioral signals as well. Then they move on to your ABM list. So you always have like a larger piece, like around 1,000, 2,000, and that list keeps getting bigger. Prospects to whom marketing campaigns are running. And when you keep tracking them for signals, they keep adding automatically. It trickles down to your sales layer and to your ABM layer. That's kind of how you manage the volume versus precision game. Sending sales messages at volume is not the answer, though.
Right, got it. So this process, Harinie, so is this industry agnostic? Because not every market will behave like a SaaS, right?
Correct. But fortunately or unfortunately, the SaaS and the tech services companies have been targeting every single industry in this manner, right? So to a large extent, I believe that you need to follow this process no matter which industry you're targeting and what product you're selling. Because let's say you are a manufacturer of industrial grade plastic bags and you want to sell to companies in the pharma sector. Now, the pharma sector is still being targeted like crazy by so many different SaaS and tech companies. It does not matter that you're selling bags, which is like a very different or unique offering, because your message is going to sit along with all the other messages coming from these companies. So in my opinion, there are very few companies, even in the traditional sectors, which are not desensitized. Very, very, very few companies. Some are so desensitized, you don't run outbound at all, I would say. Just go for marketing, content, go for other channels. That's very few. Again, this end of the spectrum is also very few. That end of the spectrum is also very few companies. There are some things, right? Like schools, universities, I would say hospitals. These are all sectors that are very hard to target through outbound. Those sectors are still hard to target through outbound. So if you target them correctly, it might work. But then again, you have issues with respect to show up meetings, show up rates, and things like that. So in all industries and all sectors, you would imagine that, oh, wow, these type of enterprises, for example, do they get targeted? Of course, they get targeted left, right, and center. Startups get targeted. So there's no sector that is free of the whole noise issue, right?
Got it. So, I'll just summarize whatever we have discussed. So if someone who's listening today wants to move from a traditional setup to a signal led setup, basically they should start with picking one ICP segment and pick one problem that they believe is really active or urgent in that segment, and pick one or two signals maybe that suggest timing and there is a need and clear need and urgency, and maybe we'll start with writing an explanatory message for them. Where we don't go in with an assumption, but you try to find out if there is a need and this is what they are indeed facing with their setup. And then you will, based on the response, you will track not just the replies. By response, I mean which signal maybe led to the reply, which role responded, what kind of objections that had come up, and whether the problem was real and whether it turned into a meeting. And if it turned into a meeting, was it qualified or not? Essentially, this is how they could go up with it. Right. So, am I missing anything here, Arni? What would you add anything to this?
No, I think you sort of covered everything. I would say just remember that it applies to every single industry. And one piece that I would definitely add is almost always today you need to have some sort of marketing element in your campaign, even in your sales campaign. What I mean by that is have case studies that are ready to ship out, which are very, very specific to that particular segment that you're targeting. Have testimonials that are ready to ship out. Include in content that is so valuable that people have no choice but to look at you as the expert in that particular industry, right? Which is kind of what
Exactly.
we are doing. We do so much free content because of the fact that we absolutely want people to derive value. And to me today, I genuinely feel like if people are able to come, listen to whatever it is that I'm talking about on the LinkedIn channel or in Instagram or with our
Yeah.
webinars, and they're able to set up their own campaigns, I'm very happy for them, right? It is the people who need additional help that should come to me as a customer. And that's the kind of approach that we all need to have. I don't think we need to worry about, hey, if I share all of this information, then how do I get customers?
Yeah.
Because you know what, we still get a lot of customers. And this is the kind of content that drives that value, because I can give all of the information and the knowledge, and still putting it together is not necessarily very easy for everybody. So I would encourage everybody to go out and share as much information and content as you can. Keep those pieces, and you don't have to do everything like we are doing. We've been building over towards this for a very long time.
Yeah.
A lot of founders, a lot of salespeople and people in marketing, they are doing a lot of juggling, a lot of different things. So they may not have the time to do everything like we are doing. Basic elements, however, are post a couple of times a week if you can. At least, if not, engage with the content that your prospects are posting. That is even more important than posting. Have like a weekly email digest that gives information. Then keep your case studies ready, keep your testimonials ready. These elements alone are going to make so much of a difference for you, right? Because if the customer can see themselves in your testimonial, they're much more likely to come to you. Um, that will also drive social proof, which gives them the confidence that I can work with you and so on.
Right, makes sense. So I think you've just answered Margie's question too. She was asking basically if there is a lot of noise, is marketing content a solution or signal is a solution?
Both are the solution. It's a very good question, right? Because we've traditionally looked at marketing and sales as these two separate elements, which will individually drive like revenue. I think it's high time, and a lot of companies are starting to do that today, where the two departments are actually working towards one goal, which is revenue. So, which means all marketing content that is being generated, every activity, every channel that marketing is activating has to also work on delivering the right kind and quality and volume of leads for sales, which will then pick up the ball and drive towards revenue. But everybody is being measured on revenue today. So my answer is, if you have only one thing you can invest in, Outbound is a good place to start as always, right? Because you first need to understand your audience, what messages are working, etc. But if you can, do not make a choice, do both. Signal led is super important. That is what is going to drive your entire like outreach. But within signal led, as I mentioned, for the larger segment, you are doing marketing. So you need marketing for that. You need content pieces to be sending out to people for that. You need events to invite them to. So these are all very important things to do. But the signals that stack up and give you more specific and targeted customers are going to get sales messages. So the two are not, in my opinion, mutually exclusive. You have to do both if you can.
Right.
But
okay.
if budget is a constraint and you have to do only one thing, I would say signal led.
Okay. So what are the ways you prioritize inbound leads?
Is that for me?
Yes, I mean, it's a question in the chat box. So what are the ways that you prioritize inbound leads? Are you meaning how different are they from outbound leads?
Okay. Let me answer that in terms of how to prioritize. Typically, what happens is that you have to build some kind of a scoring system for your leads, inbound or outbound. You have to see whether they match your ICP. You have to see whether they match the revenue filters that will mean that they can potentially have a budget to purchase your service or your product. You have to understand whether the right person has reached out to you. Because a lot of times people in India, this happens a lot in India and in parts of APAC where people down like the hierarchy, they do not have decision-making authority. They may be shopping just out of their own interest, but nothing will come out of it. You can't ignore them, but I think you should find a more efficient way of handling them than going on every single call and spending 1 hour. So look at the role. Look at whether something has specifically happened in that company, right? Now, even if you're talking to a lower level person, but that company got funded recently, new CRO, CXO, somebody has been hired who's relevant to your product or service, you may still want to engage in that conversation, find out what the decision makers, the stakeholders need to be on the call and so on. So you develop a scoring system on the basis of what is the right fit account for you. Don't ignore anyone. But someone is like, for example, when B2C customers come to us, we don't really do any lead gen in B2B. We do RevOps. But if a B2C customer comes and says, I want lead gen services, we'll be like, you know what, no, but this is the only service we offer for, the B2C segment. If you're interested, we can talk about that. Set up some sort of automatic response system where a message goes out to them 20 minutes or 30 minutes after they send something out to you. And this scoring system should be your Bible for how you treat every lead.
Yeah, it answered your question. So, Hani, one other piece that we, discussed is how, if, for example, if a company has, let's say, more than two solutions, they need a specific. It has to be customized, right? This cannot be a one size fits all.
Absolutely. So we run separate campaigns for our lead gen services because the audience for that is very different. And we run a different set of a different campaign for our RevOps services. So if you're a services company in particular, lots of times you're going to have multiple solutions. Each solution will fit a specific ICP, size of company, revenue of company, role even, right? And you have to run separate campaigns for these. I cannot just reach out to people randomly and say, hey, you know what, I do this and that. What are you interested in? This is not like a buffet menu. They're not going to choose anything. They're going to walk away.
Right. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. Wait a few minutes for the questions. So to everything that we have discussed so far, we'll be sharing it over in a mail after the session, including the signal-led framework that Harinie explained, with the signal sources, scoring logic, and the simple checklist you can use for your own GTM motion. So we'll be sharing that over with you guys.
I think Gigi has asked, what's the set of tools that we are using?
I think I just responded to it. Yeah, I think it's gone a separate thread. Yeah, I've sent my response.
Okay. Good question. They're not very effective. That's the truth of it. I think a lot of agencies that do pure email are really struggling because it's becoming increasingly harder to really stand out on email today. That said, I think that when you do signal led and you're basically stacking multiple signals and you're really smart about the subject lines, assuming that you have taken care of the logistics of delivery and you're landing in inbox, those emails are still working. But it's a very small number, that you will get when you do all of this filtering and you make sure. What we are noticing is when we do ABM, that is that one-on-one messages for the hyper, relevant leads. Those are the only cases where email is actually working consistently. What I understand from other people who run agencies itself, specifically focused on email, is that email is getting really hard to crack as a channel. Which is understandable, right? Because it's the easiest channel. It's no longer the easiest channel. It was the easiest channel. It was the least expensive channel. So people would, sort of do everything on email, but it's no longer. LinkedIn always had like volume related constraints, right? Calling has the constraint that you need a really good caller, and that's one of the problems with calling. So other channels always had constraints. Emails didn't, but today email is the most constrained channel for outbound. So I would not say ditch it entirely, but I would say use it for the one-on-one ABMs. Do really low volume there. Be as specific as possible. It still works. Otherwise, like I would say, focus on the warm calling and the LinkedIn pieces. It's better ROI. Right. Any other questions that we need to address?
So, okay, here's another one. What about voice notes and videos on LinkedIn? Will it work for all ICPs?
It will not work for all ICPs. but it will work for many ICPs. It's not a bad, we do actually use voice notes. Um, we use voice notes on both WhatsApp as well as LinkedIn. So one of the things we did not discuss is actually WhatsApp. Um, Asia, APAC, India is in these geos. Actually, WhatsApp really works. If you have a phone number, people really do respond to WhatsApp messages better than they do to, like emails, for instance. So in our outreach, actually, WhatsApp replaces email in a number of instances to send those, messages as follow-ups. Somebody has actually connected on LinkedIn but not responded to a subsequent message, or we want to set up a call and we want to follow up and get a good time. All of this WhatsApp actually works. WhatsApp messages as well as WhatsApp voice notes. LinkedIn voice notes also work, but a lot of, so this is a challenge that I have seen on LinkedIn, and I don't know if you guys have run across it. But sometimes what is happening is when you do Sales Navigator messages, right? The response is the entire thread sits in Sales Navigator. Now, me as an individual, I'm not sitting and checking my Sales Navigator messages every day. I am checking my regular messages every day. I routinely come across people who say, I messaged you so many days ago, but you did not respond. And like the problem is it is sitting in my Sales Nav messages. Right? So
Right.
one of the things I would advise is if you're running campaigns or campaigns are running from your profile, if you're a founder or a CXO and somebody else is running, do check both your regular LinkedIn inbox as well as your Sales Navigator inbox, because a lot of inbound leads come into your Sales Nav inbox, especially if you're doing a lot of marketing and content, right? This is one piece that I feel even we are not doing, I am not doing properly. So I would say definitely do that. Check both of your inboxes. Um, and the voice notes on LinkedIn, look, it depends, right? I am not a big video or a voice note person. This is why for the longest time I would not do videos either LinkedIn or for Instagram. But a lot of people, a lot of people actually do like to listen to things, and they like to see things rather than to read things. I would say for your specific audience, typically there is a tendency. Try it out and see. If voice messages work better than written messages, then maybe that's a good thing. The only thing is, caveat is, in my experience, when you leave a voice note, there is nothing there, right? There's no context. So if I want to ignore, I'll just open, somebody sent a voice note, I close it, so they don't even know what you're trying to say. But a message, some one or two words might catch my eye and I might still read your message. So even if you leave a voice note on LinkedIn, I would say leave one line with context. So at least the context will catch their eye, even if they don't listen to your voice note. That might lead to them listening to the voice note. Yeah, try everything.
So yeah, another thing, how do you think AI can assist in identifying the signal, ICP signals?
How do we think AI can help? I'm not sure I understand that question.
Yes.
If you have a whole bunch of signals and you want to understand which ones would be the most relevant for you, I think AI can be quite helpful with that. But even for that, you need to see, the thing is with AI, everybody talks about using AI, but what we all need to understand is that it's as good as the user. It's really not like objectively this is the capability. It's very subjective. It is so in our company itself, for example, Suraj, my co-founder, uses AI like nobody's business, right? Like he's great at it. He knows the right prompts to use, the right questions to ask. He's built the right kind of context internally. He's even trained it to give answers in the way that he likes to see the answers, right? That kind of an agent will really work very well for you if it understands your business, if it understands. So you need to feed in a lot of context. That's the answer. You need to talk about what your business is, what your challenges are, who your ICP is, what are your typical messages that you think will work, what is it working or is it not working, what is the history. You fed in all of this. This is like a solid, one day's job to give in all of this context and to prep. But once you've prepped it, let's say you want to run campaigns and you have all of these different signals and you want to know how to use them, how to layer them, then AI can actually really help you. But remember that the agent is only as good as the user. So you have the responsibility of building it up in such a way that it has sufficient context. Otherwise, you're going to think you're doing something very intelligently, but it is not going to be intelligent and it will not give you outcomes.
Hope that answered the question. Yes. Okay. So I think we can wrap, Harinie.
Thanks, Bhuvi.
Thank you all. Thank you all for joining. And as promised, we'll be sending over the ABM framework to you guys. So thank you. We'll see you all at the next session.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed having this conversation because something that people ask us every single day, every call that I go on or Sai goes on, these are the questions that were typically asked. So I hope that clarifies how to run signal led for everybody on this call. Bhuvi, you want to answer that?
Yes, Harinie, I think I sent it, but somehow it's not. I think it's only the person who's asking it can see it. Because otherwise,
You can't
sent
paste
it
it in
at
the
the.
comment chat.
I did paste it in the comment chat, but somehow it's getting copied to Shiv's Fathom note taker and not the meeting chat itself.
I see.
Anyway, I'll send it over in the email. Not a problem. And Satish, I will add you to the WhatsApp group. I'll also place the link here, so if you want to join the group, you can, anybody can.
So that is the GTM collective group.
Yes.
I think Akhil has posted.
Okay. Yes.
Great.
Okay. Yes, I see the error I did now. Okay, got it. Done. So the link is here. So once you input your details, you'll be automatically added to the group, Satish.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for
Thank you
joining.
all.
Pleasure being here. Bye bye.
Yes.
See you next
Bye.
time.